Hello. Hello, and welcome. Hello and welcome to this week's live. Today we're going to talk about chord tone soloing. So chord tone soloing is we're trying to hit the notes in the chords that are happening while we're actually soloing on the guitar. So this can feel like trying to catch the wind when you first do it. And we're going to talk about how you can start working on it and the common methods that people use to try and learn to do this, why you might get stuck doing those and kind of break through some blocks with that. We're going to do that all in the space of probably like 10-15 minutes today, and we'll have some fun. Hopefully you'll leave with some exercises to do. So first of all, for the uninitiated, what is chord tone soloing? Well, chord tone soloing is, rather than us just playing scales, we're actually going to follow the chords that are happening. So when you play in one key or in one scale, that's cool, but you're not always responding to the music that's happening underneath. And sometimes you can get away with it. You can get away with just playing one scale, say A minor. You can get away with just playing those notes if the music happens to be in one key. But if you're playing jazz, well, often you have to follow the chords because it's impossible sometimes to play in one key if you've got chords that are jumping around all over the place. But let me just adjust the volume here. But if you're in a song where it switches key or it has like an outlier chord, then you have to respond to that outlier chord by playing something which matches that key. So let me give you an example. If I've got a chord progression and in the key of A minor, the chords are A, B diminished, we're going to ignore. We've got C, D minor, sorry. So A minor, C, we could use D minor, E minor, F major, G major, and then back to A. All those chords are fine because they're in the minor key, but we could use one outside chord in there for something else. So what if we used an E7, an E dominant 7? We need to respond to that, which would normally be an E minor, but we could use an E major chord here. And it's not a perfect example if you know about harmonic minor, but that chord isn't going to fit in with our minor scale because the E major chord isn't in the normal key that we've been playing, the normal scale we've been playing. So when it comes to that outlier chord, we have to respond and play something that fits. And the easiest way to respond to these outlier chords is to know where the notes of those chords are and to hit tones from those chords, to actually play the notes from those chords or scales that fit with them. And so chord tone soloing is as about as descriptive as it gets for what it is. It's trying to hit the notes in the chords when you're soloing. And rather than chord tone soloing being like a way of soloing, it's actually an exercise to practice for soloing. So when it comes to soloing and improvising, who's to tell you what to do? You know, all your practice should come through and you should end up playing something that sounds good based on the scales you've done, based on the licks you've learned, based on your ear and the kind of mood you're in that day. But chord tone soloing is an exercise to practice on your guitar to orientate yourself at the fretboard. Okay, so that's my broad overview of what chord tone soloing is. Now let's look at how people practice it, what people suck at with it, where they get stuck, and some things you can do. If you're watching on live, just say hello for me. It'd be great to know where you're watching from. I had someone from France a few weeks ago. I had someone from Slovenia last week, which was cool. Be great to hear where you're from. Just pop in the comments. So when we're chord tone soloing, there's what most people do, or the kind of first exercise that gets laid out for a lot of people is like, oh, you know your scale. Now you've got to hit the chords, the notes of this chord in that scale. So you're thinking very contextually about the chord. So for instance, in your A minor scale, I'm just playing an A minor position there. If you don't know your scales at all, go to the chat below, join my emailing list, get the 5 levels of fretboard freedom. It's going to help you to build these and to know your fretboard better. And we're going to do some stuff in this video that should help you kind of with that if you've seen it already. So stick around. So if you know your scale, then what's going to happen is you go, okay, well, highlight the notes of chord 1 or the A minor chord over that scale. Okay, so we have this note, we have this note. So you're trying to throw a pattern on another pattern, which can get a bit confusing. And then they'll go, okay, now it's moved to the D minor chord. So you're still going to play that scale, but you're going to kind of think and stop on these notes while you're in that scale. So we're kind of, it's like a dream within a dream. We are inceptionizing our patterns, which gets, I think, like really meta. And it's like, oh, okay, so I'm thinking about this scale and then I'm thinking about this pattern on it. And it's all a bit much, I think. And I find it a bit unnecessary a lot of the time. It's not that it's a bad exercise. It's just that what I tend to think is it tends to kind of perpetuate what happens in guitar already, is that everyone sounds like they're playing scales when they're trying to sound like they're improvising and soloing. And then when you hear your favorite guitar player, you go, oh, it doesn't sound like my favorite guitar player. And that's because you've been learning to play scales and not solos or licks or other stuff. And it doesn't all integrate. So we need something that is somewhere in between. And what's the real fundamental piece that people struggle with on this exercise? Well, the first thing I would say is when you're chord tone soloing, you actually need to hit root notes first. So chord tone soloing, the very base level of chord tone soloing, is being able to pick an area of your fretboard and follow the chords using just root notes from that chord. So say my chord progression, think like you're a bass player is my first commandment, my first thought. A commandment's a bit grand, isn't it? My first thought when it comes to being able to follow chords when soloing is think you're a bass player, first of all, just like you would down here. If your chords were A, F, C, G, then be able to follow it in time with a metronome. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It's probably a little bit fast. Let's do a whole bar for each. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then pick an area of the fretboard where you might want to solo with that. So A. And we're not looking to do any soloing yet. The exercise is we're just trying to follow the notes in that area of the guitar. So it was A, F, what did I say? C, G. So we're trying to just follow the notes of a chord progression all over the guitar. So you then go and try and do it. What's a different area on the guitar can do it? Trying to do that all over the guitar, that's the first step. With any chord progression, can you follow the root notes? Now, the next step is obviously if we're playing chords, we want to be able to follow where the other notes in that chord are, and you focus on the triad. So if we're doing A minor, F, C, G, we've got 1 minor chord and 3 major chords. So we need to be able to find our minor thirds as we do this. So now you would try and pick an area of the fretboard, and instead of trying to play our root in each place, you're going to try and play the root and the third for each of these. So if I go back down here where I did it first, so I did A, and this happens to be a C, but that pattern, whenever my root note's here, I've always got a minor third just 2 frets down. The only time that doesn't happen is between the B string, and we'll come to that in a second. I've got 2 frets down, 1 string up, happens to be a C, but that's a minor third, whichever chord I apply it to. So A, C, F, it's F and A, which happens to look like 1 fret down, so the major third looks a little bit different. And then C. So this doesn't sound like soloing yet, but you have to get your fretboard visualization up to a level where you can solo with this stuff. And you want to take it to another area of the fretboard. So that would be okay. Let's do what we were doing here. So when we move to, I was going to talk about that. So when we go this A here, I could go down to the F down here, and it has the same pattern of a major third being there. Between the B and the G string, if I've got my F here on string 3, fret 10, my major third, because the B string whacks everything out, that's now on the same fret. So if I play the 3rd string and the 2nd string at the same time, that is a major third. If I play 1 fret down, that's a minor third. Okay, so if I did my A minor here, instead of it being, my A minor looks like 2 frets here, but it's 1 fret here. Same thing. A note here on the 10th fret, A note on the 14th fret. And then F, G. I said C, didn't I? F, C, and then G. So trying to visualize where those are and kind of see where that third is important. And then you could do the same with the 5th too. But by the time you've got 2 notes, you're ready to turn it into something a little bit, at least improvised, or with some rhythm to it. So by the time you've got 2 notes with this, say with the A, trying to picture where those are. Now, this doesn't sound sexy. It doesn't sound like grand solos. But the first thing about chord tone soloing is all about trying to open up the fretboard for your brain rather than trying to make it sound good. You're going to learn to sound good, and you're going to learn that phrasing by playing songs and licks. Doing chord tone soloing is about understanding why those licks work and why things that sound good to your ear or sound great to other players, being able to like decode them and go, oh, okay, this is this against that chord. This is going to make sense. And it all starts with trying to get your root notes down and then your functions around it. So that where the 3rd is, where the 5th is, and then the rest of the scale on top. So I think the scale, when you're going from this analytical side, is less important at the moment, less important to what's going on in these than it is to start by trying to follow songs with root notes. And that's where I would start. Once you can do that, and say I like a good place to start is on strings 2, 3, 4. So if you could take, say, the A minor here, and if you follow my 5 levels of fretboard freedom, you should be able to do this on strings 2, 3, 4, work out where an A minor is for the root 3 and the 5, and then we should be able to move to the F. There's actually only 1 note difference. So I've gone 7, 5, 5, 7, 5, 6. For the C, 5, 5, 5. My root's now in the middle. And then for the G, it's down here, root 3, 5. We should now be able to actually follow where those strides are. Okay, so trying to follow a chord progression is a chord tone soloing exercise. And working through the exercise, most important thing. Once you get good at it, you're going to switch in and out of choosing to follow and hit a chord, or play through scale patterns, or following your ear, or using licks. And hopefully when you do that enough, you'll be able to actually not switch off, but play intuitively, responding to the music. But this is one of those essential exercises, and it is an exercise, which is why it doesn't immediately sound like music, that you have to practice, that you will turn into music the more that you do it. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Please hit the like, comment, and subscribe buttons. We hit 400 people this last week, which is a very, to me, that's a huge amount of people. I realize in the world of YouTube, no one's sending me a plaque yet, but I think that's awesome. And I'm like, wow, there's 400 people who think this stuff's cool, or maybe they don't think it's cool. Maybe they accidentally, 300 of them hit the subscribe button by accident. But if you're one of the ones who like my content, I think that's awesome. And I'm really happy that you keep showing up to these videos. So thank you very much for coming today. And I hope you enjoyed the session, and keep practicing. I will see you next time. Thanks.